The Resident Evil's 5th numbered entry really caused a lot of division in the community, or at least furthered the division that was already there. On one hand, it brought back a lot of older elements that a lot of people felt that Resident Evil 4 was missing, but on the other hand, it showed that Capcom was completely on board with continuing to convert the series from a survival horror game to a third-person shooting action game. But no matter which side you're on in that division, Resident Evil 5 is undeniably a very important game of the series. It brought back a lot of older elements and finally gave us a conclusion to the story arc that started with the series' very first game on the PlayStation. Better yet, that important game of the series is finally available on handhelds. Here is my review of Resident Evil 5 for the Nintendo Switch. This story takes place 5 years after the events of Resident Evil 4. Chris Redfield is now a part of the anti-bioterror group, the BSAA, and is sent to intercept a black market deal in Africa. But upon encountering BOWs in the area and finding clues about someone from his personal past, he goes against his evacuation orders to find out what's really going on. I think the story of this game is so good because of what it brought back to the series. Resident Evil 4 was the first game to really move away from the Umbrella Corporation, Albert Wesker, and most of the more mainline story aspects all of the pre-4 games dealt with. 5 brought back all of those elements and, like I said in the intro, brought a good conclusion to the story arc that started way back in the original entry of the series. Now, there are a lot of people who question why the game ended the way it did, and I don't really blame them because a lot of stuff happened that was really out of character. But even with that in mind, 5 still gives us a good conclusion to the series up to that point. When it comes to gameplay, Resident Evil 5 is a third-person shooting co-op game with lots of action sequences, enemies for you to shoot down, and quick-time events. Like with the other Nintendo Switch Resident Evil games, this is a port of the HD remaster that released on the Xbox One and PS4. That means all the Mercenaries DLC from Resident Evil 5 Gold Edition has been combined into one mode, along with the other story expansions like Lost in Nightmares. It also has the new features and tweaks from the remaster, like giving you options to set the QuickTime event inputs to a single button or allowing you to skip them entirely. But you don't have to go alone in this game. Resident Evil 5 had a really big focus on co-op, and all of those co-op features are still here on the Switch. At virtually any point of the game, you can go into your menu to start doing split-screen couch co-op, or set your game as a multiplayer game so someone who's online can seek out your session and join you in online co-op. Now, when you're going through the game, it's going to feel very similar to Resident Evil 4, which makes a lot of sense. When 4 first released, it was and still is to some people regarded as one of the greatest games of all time. So 5 brought a lot of its systems with enhancing a few things here and there, from the co-op to the control scheme. As such, you'll be navigating 3D areas and shooting down lots of enemies along with your AI partner. Outside of doing combat, each area is pretty much just a task of exploring and finding resources, from ammunition to healing herbs. And the latter is pretty important because the resources are about all that remained of the series' survival horror roots. While the game does maintain a good balance of using resources sparingly with the 9-item inventory restrictions, RE5 leans much more towards being a third-person shooting action game than a survival game. And this focus gets stronger the further you go into the game. If you look back at RE4, you were introduced to fighting groups of enemies in that game, but they were all mostly slow and took time to reach you. In this game, most of the enemies will run at you, and it goes even more shooter-centric towards the later parts of the game where enemies start carrying firearms from rifles to rocket launchers. It really is an action-packed and much faster-paced game than anything the series had seen up to that point. But that doesn't make it a bad game. While the community is very divisive to this day about which formula is better, the faster pace definitely kept the adrenaline flowing and really let time fly with that pacing while still giving you a good amount of content and length. Speaking of, the main campaign took me about 10 to 12 hours to do, and the story expansions easily brought that up to about 13 to 15 hours. That alone is a good amount of content for the price you're paying, but it's worth noting that I know my way around the game pretty well. I went through Gold Edition several times, and about a year or two ago I helped a friend with a professional difficulty co-op run on the PS4. So if you haven't played the game before, you might get even more time out of it. Now let's talk about controls, which has good news and bad news. The good news is there was a day one patch to both this and Resident Evil 6 that added pretty good motion aiming to the control scheme. The bad news is the controls for Resident Evil 5 are just as tanky and awkward as they were before. It's less tanky than the controls we had in Resident Evil 4, but it's still awkward and takes some time to get used to, especially towards the end of the game where you've got enemies with rocket launchers and assault rifles and you have to stand completely still while you carefully aim at them and shoot them. Now let's dive into presentation, which is pretty good. Graphically, the game looks great. There's a ton of detail on all of the models, and the game doesn't look that different in handheld mode. When you undock it or play it on the light, there are a few less lighting details, but overall it looks great all around. Now in terms of performance, there are some small frame drops when you're going through the game in certain areas. Most of these are only apparent in handheld mode, but there are a couple sections like when the flying BOWs first show up that do have some small frame drops in docked mode. And now let's dive into battery life. On the original model, Resident Evil 5 has a battery range of 2 hours and 37 minutes up to 3 hours and 34 minutes. On the Nintendo Switch Lite, it has a range of 3 hours and 9 minutes up to 4 hours and 31 minutes. And on the V2 or Redbox model, it has a range of 4 hours and 16 minutes up to 5 hours and 15 minutes. Now in conclusion, RE5 makes it to handhelds with good optimization and all content intact. Now on the downside, the controls are still very tanky and stiff, and the game's got a few frame drops in a few areas. But overall, these are blemishes and nitpicks from an otherwise great game that nicely concludes a series-long story. Reviews to Go rates Resident Evil 5 for the Nintendo Switch a 9 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching and have a great day.